I'm going to show you how to do a shoe raise. And here's a shoe over here that we're going to raise. We're going to raise a shoe by exactly 3 centimeters. So I've already split the shoe, but I'm going to just explain about splitting a shoe and how to split a shoe. So we put that down. The first thing we need to do is have a look at the actual shoe itself. Okay, so here we have two types of sandals. The one is a flip-flop, this over here, and the other is a sandal with a heel counter. So this is your heel counter here. Now the most important thing is to check inside the shoe to make sure how much you can actually cut off the bottom of the sole. So let's have a look at this one over here. I'm just going to remove this, and you can see that this shoe is a special type of shoe that you can actually remove the entire inner sole. So I'm going to remove this inner sole, and as you can see, this inner sole is quite a thick inner sole. It's got a little bit of Velcro over there, and it will then go in directly inside the shoe. So if we have to take a measurement of the exact amount that we need to split, we'll quickly find out that this type of shoe will be almost impossible to split without cutting straight through the actual sole itself. So there you can see it's really an illusion thinking that this whole part over here is this whole part here is going to be sole that you can split off, because if you look inside there, you know, the part that the depth of that is approximately 1.5 centimeters, the same thickness as the sole over here. So now for a shoe like this, if you need to do a shoe raise on a shoe like this, what you will have to do is remove or grind the bottom of the sole so that you can have a tacky surface, and then you would then add your material directly on top of the sole, which will most probably be black EVA with a shore hardness of approximately 60 shore. So you'll then put your layer of EVA on, and depending on how many centimeters you need to raise your shoe by, you will actually then add on pieces after each other, because it's very difficult to put on, for instance, one piece of 3 centimeter EVA onto the bottom of the shoe. And then, of course, to finish that off, you would then apply top nylon cover onto the bottom of the shoe, and then to make sure that both shoes are the same, you could also then put a top nylon cover on to the other shoe, the shoe that hasn't been corrected. Patients would like to make sure that their shoes look the same underneath, but it doesn't have to be done like that. And we can see by looking at this flip-flop, you can see that we've got a bit of sole here to be able to work with and to split. So just for interest's sake, now these are all demonstration models, so I'm just going to show you on what I would normally do to split the sole. So the first thing you're going to do is that if you can look over there, you see I've actually drawn a line on the actual shoe where I'm going to split it. And then of course you would require a nice sharp knife, one like this, with a very sturdy blade, and then you can then split the shoe. So just remember that when you're cutting or splitting a shoe, that you have to be very, very careful that you don't slip and cut either into the shoe itself where you don't want to cut, or cut your leg or cut part of your body, because that could be extremely dangerous. So I would choose my line, and I would then cut into the shoe like this. And I'm going to cut all the way around the shoe on my line that I've created. And you can see I'm not going to just cut one go. I'm going to just slowly start taking the shoe and start cutting the shoe and removing the sole. So as you can see, I've got a few cuts in there now. And obviously I would then cut all the way through. But let me just show you over here at the rear section of the shoe. So once I've got my cut in there, once I've got my cut in, I should be able to start cutting in deeper and deeper into the actual sole itself. Now once I've got that, I'll be able to peel the sole back, and then we'll be able to start cutting in almost like filleting a fish, that you would then cut the entire sole off. So once you've done that, you'll have a shoe or a sole that's been cut similar to this. Okay, and there you can see that's been removed. And that's the part that I need to now deal with. Okay. Now, before we begin, these are some of the tools that you require for actually doing any kind of shoe raise. The first one would be a vernier. So you could use the vernier, and the vernier is going to really determine on how much you've actually raised the shoe by, and to be precise. Okay, so that's the first part. You'll need a tape measurer. Your tape measure will be so that you can make sure that you've measured the correct size of your material. You'll require a mallet, or a wooden or a rubber mallet. You're going to need some masking tape, some of these tongue depressors, a little cloth, and then of course you've got your solvents and adhesives. So the first thing we have a look at is your EVA primer. So to be able to to stick these two parts together, or to make sure that this surface adheres to our EVA surface that we're going to be putting on there, we'll be utilizing EVA primer to be able to prime the surface, so that we change the chemical composition of the surface, so that when you add your polyurethane cement, or better known as Megabond, that you will have a permanent bond. Otherwise, what will happen is, if you just put your Megabond or your PU cement directly onto your EVA surface, you will not have a surface that will adhere to your build-up material. So that's very, very, very important. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to fill this section up so that I get a nice, clean, smooth surface over here. And then I will then remove some of this material over here, so that when I stick this back on, that we'll have a nice surface. And of course, you're going to have a shoe raise that is a balanced shoe raise. So what we're trying to do is raise it up like that, basically. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a pylon in over here with a prosthetic foot, and that is going to be my last, because I'm going to require a last. I'm going to use my rubber mallet to be able to properly adhere the material onto the surface. Okay, so let's get going with that. All right, so now I've skived the surface. As you can see over here, there's a skived surface over there. And that skived surface, I need to skive it, and because you can see this is a much softer EVA. So we've got about a 40 shore. But I need to make sure that I'm going to fill up these gaps over here. And I won't be able to fill it up with a very, very hard shore EVA. So what you do is you skive it down, and then you make sure that your skive will go right to the front of your shoe. And that's how you're going to then initially stick it down. So your first piece that you're going to stick down will be right up into that point of the toe. Okay, now we're going to apply our EVA primer. What you're going to do is you're going to just take a little one of these tongue depressors, and you can just cover it up with a cloth, because you're going to try not to get any of this on your hands if possible. So I'm going to just get some of my EVA primer out, and we're going to prime the surface. And we also have to prime the surface of the shoe as well. So we're going to make sure that we get all the little nooks and crannies nicely primed. Right, we want to try and keep the actual primer on the material. We want to be able to keep it on for about 5 minutes before we can begin applying any kind of glue on this. But for other types of primers, you may need much longer. For instance, Ario wash, which will be a chlorine wash, will require at least 30 minutes of resting time before you can actually apply your adhesives on that. I'm now going to take my masking tape, and I'm just going to mask off the areas that I do not want any glue or anything to go onto, especially the actual shoe, because sometimes you're dealing with extremely expensive shoes and you don't want anything to happen to the shoe itself. It's very important for a safety is that your laces need to be tied up and not loose, because when you start grinding the shoe, you don't want your laces to get stuck in the actual grinding machine, which can cause injury to yourself and of course to damage the shoe, which you'll need to replace if you do damage the shoe. So it is a high risk. Okay, to ensure that your sole doesn't flap around while you're busy gluing and pasting and grinding, you can also just strap the sole back onto itself over there with some masking tape, and just make sure that the sole doesn't come off. Now I'm going to apply my Mega Bond or my polyurethane cement directly onto the shoe. The way that you know which type of glue you're using is that you know if you use Mega Bond and you put Mega Bond directly onto your surface of your shoe, you'll feel also that the entire surface will actually get cold. Right, so that's how you know that you're working with Mega Bond, and of course Mega Bond is also completely transparent. I'm using a tongue depressor instead of a brush because I can throw the tongue depressor away, it's disposable, and whereas a brush I would have to then, every time I'd have to clean that brush. So I'm just going to use this, and I can also ensure that I can spread a really thin layer of Mega Bond directly onto the surface. And with a brush, you find it a little bit harder to be able to get a thin layer. I'm now going to apply my Mega Bond onto my layer, my first layer of EVA. And as you can see, I can scoop out quite a bit and then just start, working that Mega Bond over the surface with my tongue depressor and making sure that I cover all the surfaces. Your Mega Bond or your polyurethane cement needs to be not completely dry, but just slightly tacky to the touch. So then you'll know that it's ready to be able to apply heat, because remember, these are heat activated glues, and you need to make sure that you apply heat to both surfaces, the surface that you've got over here that you'll be putting on and the actual surface of the actual shoe itself. So to heat up the shoe, you'll require a heat gun to heat the shoe up, or the bottom of the shoe, and over this, your surface, that you're going to also need to make this pliable so that it can be stuck directly onto the shoe surface, ensuring that it conforms to all the little nooks and crannies of the actual shoe. So this will go directly in the oven, and we're going to be using the Otterbock oven over here. And I've set the oven to 160 degrees for EVA, which will be perfect for that. So there goes my little piece in the oven. I'm going to close that up. All right, and that's going to go in there for approximately 5 minutes. All right, and then we can start preparing the shoe. Okay, we can prepare the shoe, or this first layer, by utilizing the heat gun. And you want to heat it up, but you don't want to heat it too much. You've got to regulate your heat. What you don't want is bubbles to form on the surface. You just keep your heat gun moving and then heat your surface nicely. Now it's quite important to make sure that you heat up the edges of the shoe, because this is where your shoe will have a tendency to tear loose from the build-up. So make sure that you heated that section up very nicely. Wherever you've got excess glue, you will have experienced a bit of bubbles, but just make sure you just keep heating it up nicely. Okay, let's see if our EVA is ready. All right, we check it out. I'm going to just bend it a little bit like this, just to see if it's warm enough to be able to take the shape, and I think that feels fine. So I'm going to take that out, close my oven again. You will need gloves to do this, so just make sure that you are gloved up. So I've got my piece here, and now I'm going to just very carefully put it right at the front part of the shoe, and then slowly just mold it over the shoe, and then with my hand I'm just going to mold it around the actual shoe itself so that it can take that shape. Well, we've got a nice thick piece here, and that's a good thing, because we'll be able to grind quite a bit of this away so that we can get a really nice smooth surface to work on, to put the rest of our layers on there. Okay. Now I'm just going to cut off some of the excess of the build-up so that I can see what I'm working with. But just remember, don't cut too close to the shoe, because if you cut too close to the shoe, you may end up having to redo this whole thing because you cut too close to the actual shoe itself. So here we go, cutting around there, and there you can see that's almost a little bit too close even, but that will be fine, and we'll do the other side as well. Okay, now we're going to just use the boot finishing machine, and we're going to grind the shoe. So we'll grind the surface over here so that we can then reduce a lot of this. Okay, always follow the shape of the shoe. So you can see the line over here that I'm using. Bring that down a bit. There. The line that I'm using, I need to make sure that I don't grind the line in. I want to be able to grind the line out. So my line of attack, my point of attack will be over there. Alright, not there, it will be there. So that I can then grind that shoe and make sure that I have a nice overlap for the rest of my material to stick onto. Now what I'm looking for here is to be able to grind this down so that it is almost completely smooth surface over here, and it doesn't have this bow that you see over here. We're going to grind that out. Okay, the front can be tricky. You have to be sure that you're not going to grind it this way. You're going to be grinding it sideways like this. Alright, and as you can see, it's starting now to take shape. We've got a nice smooth surface at the bottom. Now we can see that we've got a slightly different surface. We've got a lot smoother surface. So this is going to be a lot easier to be able to apply a harder material onto this. You don't want to be able to make it too soft, otherwise it'll just bottom out. So you need to make sure that you've got using at least a 55 to a 60 shore for your actual build-up material. Okay, so let's just quickly check how thick our actual material is. This is our 55 shore, 60 shore EVA, and it's got a gristle on the one side and smooth on the other side, but that doesn't matter, we're going to grind this off anyways. And with our vernier, we'll quickly just check what thickness we've got. So on our vernier setting, we've got a thickness of 12 millimeter. If we use 3 of these pieces, it'll be too much, so we're going to do quite a lot of grinding. But we're going to check now. We'll first use 2 pieces and then we can see how far we get. Okay, this is the second piece now that I've put on. Just come out the oven, and now I'm going to use my rubber mallet just to make sure that I've got good adhesion between the surfaces. Now for some more EVA primer. Put some more primer on both surfaces, and then of course glue. Okay, so if you are going to be taking anything out of the stores, it's best to make certain that you fill out an order form as well. So just your name, right, and your student number, and then you need to fill out what type of materials you actually used. So I can say that I used EVA. Okay, now that we've got all our material on, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. And there you can see from the side now exactly what it looks like. And now let's just quickly check with our vernier to check on how thick we've actually got the material. So remember now, we've also put on the slightly softer material. So that looks approximately 5 millimeters, and then we've got a couple of 12s here. So let's just quickly see, what are we looking at? So at the heel, we're looking at 4 centimeters. So that means that we're going to have to almost grind this entire top surface away. But as you can see, as it comes to the front, it starts to taper to the front. And this is actually what I've tried to show you guys, is that with this shoe, I didn't actually cut straight through. I've left the front of the sole onto the shoe so that I don't have to cut that off. So I'm going to taper that. We got 3 centimeters here, but we're going to bring that right down to approximately 2.5 centimeters and 1 centimeter in the front, so that we have a balanced heel and sole. So we're going to grind the sides down first, and then we're going to reduce the height so we can get the shape of the actual shoe. To do that, we're going to just start by just grinding that piece off. Okay, again, what is important is that you always lean the grinder that it is slightly away from the bottom, so that you're wedging it slightly further out this way. You don't want to wedge it this way, and then when you stick the sole back on, that the sole's not meeting correctly. So I'm just going to grind away just this part over here, and this is the important part where I'm going to be grinding. Now how you're going to be able to balance this is to be able to check to see if you are doing it right, you're going to be able to find a level on the shoe, and then just drop that side and you can then see where you need to grind. So you can see now the front of the shoe, this front portion over here is slightly higher, and I need to make sure that this is the same level as that. Okay, now you can see I'm actually taking the sole and I'm going to be grinding the sole just to create a nice flat surface. Okay, now at this stage I just want to double check to see how many more millimeters I need to remove, and we can see that we're sitting now at 3.6, 2.5 at the forefoot. So I'm happy with the forefoot. We're going to leave the forefoot. This is the correct amount for the forefoot. Now we just need to balance out the rest. So we need to remove approximately 8 millimeters. We need to remove all of this over here. So I'm just going to make a little mark, and that'll be my mark, my reference point. Your entire shoe is balanced, and the way to check that is to, once you've done all your grinding work and you've flattened out your surface of the sole as well, and you want to just kind of put them together, and you just want to just see what's going to happen if you ride the shoe heel toe. So if you place the shoe on the heel and it hits the toe and you've got a bit of movement, like a bit of a wobble at the forefoot, then you know that you haven't been grinding straight and you need to redo that. So I think that we should be okay now. Okay, so at this stage, because you're using a very high density EVA, which makes the shoe quite heavy, I'm going to be drilling holes in the actual shoe to reduce the weight of the shoe. Okay, there you can see the hole. Okay, we've made it so that that's our marker. We mustn't go deeper than that. And we can get drilling. Okay, we've got all our holes. Make it a bit lighter. Okay, now that your surfaces are ready, and you're going to be putting on EVA primer on this surface and on this surface, and then glue. Once you've drilled holes inside the actual build-up, like we did earlier on, I then just put on the EVA primer on both surfaces, and then I just waited for a few minutes and stuck it down. Obviously, remember that it is all heat activated glue, so you have to stick it down nicely. And to create a nice smooth surface like this, you need to use a buffer, which makes it a lot easier. And then of course, once you remove all your masking tape and you put all your original shoe components back, like all the paper, and you can just pop it back into the box, just like this. And always try and present your nicest side in the box. First impressions are going to be important.